My name is Alex and welcome back to Magic Missile Minis. Today I'm going to be doing a quick tutorial on how to sculpt hands and feet for your D&D miniatures. First, we're going to start with the feet. I want you guys, rather than to think about a foot as a rectangle, I want you to think about it as two spheres. Here we start by sculpting in the heel, which is the first of our two spheres, and then at the front we have the ball of the foot. However, as we make the heel especially, we'll take this sphere of green stuff that we're adding and flatten it from underneath, creating the shape of our heel. As we add the sphere of green stuff onto the front of the foot, we want to try to maintain the spherical shape of both the heel and the front. However, this front section is going to come to a little bit of a point. Here I added a little bit too much green stuff, so I go and quickly remove that, which is one detail I should mention about both hands and feet when you're sculpting at this scale. You are going to be very tempted to add far too much material. You'll notice there are several times in this video where I add too much material and need to take it off afterwards. Here what you'll see is I'm noticing that the position that this miniature is in means that the weight of the foot is actually going to be on the front as opposed to the heel. Generally speaking, you should think of this as you pose your miniature rather than as you're sculpting it here, but it's not the end of the world. Obviously, that's what I had to do for this. To make that adjustment, I simply bend the foot a little bit, lifting the heel up from the floor and making sure that the front part of the foot will be flush with the floor. The next step is the arduous task of trying to make toes. What I would suggest is, generally speaking, using an X-Acto blade, but mine was a little dull, so I also came in to edit this with my needle tool. If I'm being perfectly honest, half of the time this was such a small detail that I could barely see what I was doing. This can be really difficult to do. If you have magnifying glasses, that would be perfect for this because it's such a tiny little detail. It can really help and make the difference. Something that can also help with sculpting around the wire, as you can see here, you could have the wire come out of the front toe as opposed to in the middle of the rest of the toes. Now on to the first method I wanted to show you of doing hands. This, I think, is one of the most important ones, is how to do hands when they're not holding anything, because I find that those tend to be a lot more difficult. The first step is to simply create the palm. You basically want to make a somewhat rectangular square shape that comes to a little bit of a point, and then once that's fully set, you can start adding fingers. Here I leave a little bit of wire to act as a base for the raised two fingers that are going to be casting some kind of spell. Something you'll notice here is that I'm putting down one piece of green stuff and then I'm using that to create two fingers. I find that this is a much better way of creating hands than trying to add each individual finger. This way I can simply add a little bit of green stuff and then put in an indentation for where the fingers would separate. And that tends to be all you need to do at this scale and keeps you from working with tiny little pieces of green stuff that tend to fall off or get deformed very, very quickly. When I add the thumb, I also make sure to add the thumb joint that you notice that if you look at your hand, it's not perfectly flat. The joint sticks out from the base of your palm. So I add that all in one large piece and then start playing around with the positioning for the thumb. This I find is helpful because it creates a good connection to the palm and leaves you space to move the thumb around separate from the rest of the hand, and tends to be a fairly easy way to make a consistent thumb on the entirety of your hand. The next thing I wanted to do was work on a hand holding something. So here, really quickly, I add a longer piece of wire to create the staff for this miniature that I create a little loop in, tie that around the other wire, and then glue that in place once I've clamped it down. Then I cover the entire wire in a layer of green stuff. As with the last hand, I always start by adding the palm, trying to mimic again the square shape that comes to a little bit of a point where the middle finger is going to be sticking out of. You can wait for this to set, but when you have a hand that is attached to something, generally speaking, you can actually just go ahead and start sculpting the fingers right away. You want to kind of create a little bit of a mitten, because just as with the other hand, I combined the two fingers, I'm going to add all four in one piece of green stuff. And then I will take any flat tool and I'll create the indentation for the fingers, making sure to come up at the very ends to separate the digits at the very end to make sure that they look less like grooves in a piece of green stuff and more like individual fingers. Once that is in a place that I like it, I follow the same process I did before with the thumb. Generally speaking, I have the thumb running along whatever the miniature is holding, since I find that's a little bit more accurate, but you can also have the thumb curling over the fingers in a fist. But always make sure to emphasize the thumb joint at the base of the palm, because even when your hand is closed, that is still visible. Thank you so much for watching that video. I really hope it helped you with sculpting your D&D miniatures. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, do all of the algorithm things. It is a huge help. And if you like, you can support me on Patreon. Here beside me should be all of the names of the current patrons. If you want to see your name here, get some extra content, I am actually uploading regularly now. So I was behind on Patreon for a while, but I am now posting regularly, so you can go check that out now. Also, if you don't mind, I'm a part of a band. We're called Kin. All the socials and links are in the description for that, and this is what one of our songs sound like.
All the kids are running away from home, never had a place for them to know who they are, how to live. Don't look like that, don't live like this.
So if you enjoy that sound, I really appreciate if you checked us out. We're on SoundCloud now, so our lyrics are up there. I know some people were asking for that at some point. So if you want to support my band, I would really appreciate it. Go check out the Instagram, the Spotify, the SoundCloud, all of that stuff is a huge help. But thanks again for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one.